heard the phrase that truth is stranger than fiction. Well, this series aims to paraphrase that saying by claiming that life can be more frightening than horror fiction. We have compiled eyewitness testimony of strange and even sinister events that have taken place throughout time. I have personally met, interviewed, and filtered out the stories that could not be backed up with authentic documentation. I warn you that this true story is horrifying and will touch upon sensitive subject matter. So with that said, let's begin. In 2007, I graduated from the Baltimore City Fire Academy. My parents were very proud for keeping up with the family tradition. Much like my father and his grandfather before him, I spent a lot of time on the job. Time and sanity. Now, I was only a couple years in when this incident took place. I was working night shift, which at that time required me to work 3 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. the following day. What some people may not realize is that aside from fire calls, personnel riding the suppression units are also required to respond to medical calls alongside the ambulances. I was at a very busy suppression company. Though we did see some fire, the crew along with other companies joked about how our unit was basically a big medic unit. But because of that, I've seen a lot. Enough to satisfy the ears of anyone willing to listen at least. But there was always something strange about this particular call. It came in around midnight, give or take. Dispatch came across our radio and asked our engine company to respond to a location we called the 4x4s. It was a few blocks of row homes inside a square-like radius. This particular box area was also the furthest north our company would respond. The report was for an assault, with the only details being patient is in a green sedan. Now, it is a habit of firefighters to be aware of their surroundings from the time we leave station till the time we return. We do this in means of patrol. This is to make sure we weren't given a false address and accidentally passed the person who had called. And it's also just to look for smoke on the horizon. We were about halfway to our destination when we came across a car parked oddly on the side of the highway. The back door was wide open, and we saw a pair of legs sticking out the back. My officer in charge noticed the car was in fact a green sedan, and even though it wasn't the exact address, it was only a few blocks off. And again, the vehicle description was exactly like dispatch had said. As we pulled up behind the sedan, a man jumped from the back seat of the vehicle and ran full sprint into the woods across from us. Which was odd, but we've seen stranger things than that. Anyway, I grabbed the jump bag, and I grabbed the oxygen tank. We all exit the engine and walk over and investigate the vehicle. Inside the back seat of the green sedan was a woman, perhaps in her late 20s, early 30s. She was half exposed, and her clothes were torn from the waist down. She was pretty beat up, but conscious. She was able to tell us that the man who had just ran off into the woods was planning to take advantage of her had we not arrived. We told her that the medic was on the way and that we had requested police. Now, it's very rare that 911 is called and we are able to arrive on scene prior to anyone being hurt. Most of the time, our calls are, unfortunately, reactionary opposed to preventative. While waiting for the other responding units, this got me thinking, how was she able to call if this just started? And why would the assailant remain on scene knowing that 911 was called? And just then, dispatch keyed up on our mics. They asked why we haven't arrived on scene yet. Well, we explained that we had, and we gave an updated address as it was a few blocks off the initial incident location given, but we were on scene with an assault. Dispatch then said something that truly chilled me. They said the patient called and is still on scene waiting for your arrival. See, the patient we had stumbled upon had never called 911, and she wouldn't have been able to. It was by chance that we were able to intervene and stop a predator before the act. The victim of the attack was notably grateful for our timing and was eventually taken to the hospital for further evaluation via ambulance. But the call wasn't over. As odd as this chance occurrence was, it was about to get stranger. We pulled into the neighborhood we called the 4x4s and arrived at the location dispatch had initially provided us. And standing in the road next to a maroon Dodge minivan was an older man. We could see he was visibly bleeding from his head, so we routinely followed the same steps as before, grabbed the medical bag, grabbed the oxygen, and carefully approached the scene. The man had a small laceration above his left eye and informed us that he had a passenger with him who had attacked him with a knife. The attacker was long gone by this point. But the patient's wounds were superficial and required no stitches and very little treatment. Police were already on scene, and because of this, we learned that the victim did not know his passenger. You may wonder how that is. Well, it's not so strange if you're a cab driver. See, in Baltimore, there are plenty of cab companies that provide their passengers with a full-sized option of travel, like a minivan. Now, if you recall, the initial dispatch had stated that our patient would be in a green sedan, and this was our main catalyst for stopping at the first location. The woman that was assaulted was in a green sedan. Here's the creepy part. This taxi driver who was attacked while escorting a passenger around in his maroon minivan actually worked for a Baltimore City taxi service called Green Sedan Taxi. Had he given his actual make and model and not the cab company's name, we would have never stopped. I mean, there's a chance we may have assumed the car on the side of the highway was broken down, and we may even have informed dispatch about it, but we wouldn't have stopped. The odds of this coincidence are just unimaginable. This night could have ended much differently if all these small factors did not come into play. It makes me wonder how many cars drove by that vehicle on the highway before we stopped. It's a miracle the details given were just enough to accidentally save a life. Now, I'm not a religious person, nor do I believe in the paranormal, things like that. But I can't help but wonder if this is more than coincidence. Well, whatever it was indeed a case of wrong place, right time,